I believe the church is one of God's greatest gifts to our lands, where there is a community of believers, where they take you in, where they love you, where they accept you. And the church makes a dangerous mistake when it becomes a condemning community rather than a receiving and a healing community.
The Christian walk is a relationship with God. So what does it mean when we don't feel our faith? Does that mean God is distant or that perhaps He doesn't care? Does it mean Christianity is false? Join us this week on Just Thinking and find out as we hear from author and apologist Ravi Zacharias. Welcome back to Just Thinking. As Ravi has mentioned this week, there are going to be times when a Christian doesn't feel his faith. It doesn't mean that God isn't there or that His message is any less true than when our emotions were running high. When those times hit, He uses several languages to speak to our hearts. It's with that thought in mind that we begin today's message from Ravi. How does God speak to our hearts in times of struggle? Here's Ravi.
Some years ago, I was in Damascus, Syria. I love the Middle East part of this world. I miss it so much when I'm not there, as turbulent as it is sometimes. One day I'd finished speaking at a church in Damascus, and a man came to me and whispered to me, "Will you drive in the car with me, please? I'll take you to where you're going next." He said, "I want to tell you the story of my life." And I sat there and listened. He said, "Mr. Zacharias, during the war with Israel, I was a Syrian soldier on the Golan Heights. I knew it was over that night. I knew we were going to be finished. As the Israeli troops were closing in, I knew we'd be whipped," he said. He said, "I didn't know what to do. But I dipped into my bag, and this big man says my mother had given me a Bible." And he said, "There on the Golan Heights, late at night, I took out a flashlight and I read the Bible. It brought me to Christ." He said, "I wept on the mountain on the hill knowing I had no strength left to fight. I'd been battle weary." And his commanding officer came and said, because the battle was going to be so heavy that night, they needed fresh troops. We were going to be replaced. He said, "I walked away and went back home." He said, "Today I am at this church to listen to you, and I want you to know what you're preaching is the truth. I found that Christ on the Golan Heights the night before we were vanquished." The Word, God's language to our hearts. Secondly, as you look in that upward, I challenge you for the language that you speak to yourself. Let me just quickly read this to you. Oswald Chambers says there are things we must not pray about. Moods, for instance. Moods never go by praying. Moods go away by kicking. A mood nearly always has its seed in the physical condition, not in the moral condition. It is a continual effort to listen to moods which arise from a physical condition, never to submit to them for a second. We have to take ourselves by the scruff of the neck and shake ourselves, and we will find that we can do what we said we could not. The curse with most of us is that we won't. The Christian life is one of incarnate spiritual pluck. He says, unless we train our emotions, they will lead us around by the nose, and we will be captives to every passing impulse or reaction. But once faith is trained to control the emotions and know how to lean resolutely against weakness of character, another entryway of doubt is sealed shut forever. Much of our distress as Christians comes not because of sin, but because we are ignorant of the law of our own nature. I don't know how you feel. I can speak for myself. From the moment I awaken, myself is speaking to me. I hear all kinds of thoughts coming into my mind. And what Oswald Chambers in My Utmost for His Highest says, reverse that, speak to yourself. Do you think that's sort of suggestion? Absolutely not. The Apostle Paul says it to the Corinthians. For my part, I run with a clear goal before me. I'm like a boxer who does not beat the air. I bruise my own body and make it know its master. David says, be at rest once more, O my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. The language of God to you. The language of you to yourself. Thirdly, the language of obedience. For the Greeks, it was truth by reason. For the Hebrews, it was truth by obedience. If you're living a disobedient life, nothing is going to help the feelings until you start living that obedient life. Fourthly, the language of friends. The language of friends. Read the book of Job, and you will find out why God was angry with the friends who failed to support Job. After being on the road for 25 years, I have come to value so much friendships. Sometimes it'll be a phone call, sometimes it'll be a little note. And all over this globe today, when you land and you're embraced by somebody, I treasure those friendships now. I treasure them very, very dearly. And the greatest friend, of course, God has given is in the immediate family, where your partner or your children. And if you're not blessed with that and have learned to bore a life alone so graciously, friends have carried you, you will testify to it. It is the language of God. It is the language of us to ourselves. It is the language of obedience that doesn't just go with emotions. Could I illustrate that briefly because I ran past that so quickly? I think I've learned more from observing Margie in this than from anything I could have ever learned from myself. And you'll have to pardon me for saying this, but I have learned what her great strength is in these, and I don't want to embarrass her on this. But any time there has been a disagreement, or any time there's been a point of tension of some sort, and the feelings want you to proudly turn away and not make it right because somehow you want to appear strong, you know what that's like. I have watched her reach out every time, just grab that hand and put it all back in perspective, that it is the love that is going to carry us through understanding this, however minor or however moderate the issue may be. Obedience precedes the emotion. The language of obedience, the language of friends, and lastly, the language of the church. I love the church. Our ministry stands alongside the church. Long after these parachurch ministries have come and gone, it is the church of Christ that is going to stand. I believe the church is one of God's greatest gifts to our lands, where there is a community of believers, where they take you in, where they love you, where they accept you. And the church makes a dangerous mistake when it becomes a condemning community rather than a receiving and a healing community. The church flirts with danger when it can judicially deal with people and forget the grace that must accompany everything. We long to be part of that body, and God has given to us His bride. It is a community that helps us in the feelings. But I want to underscore one other thing the church does. It gives us the gift of music, which is one of the greatest gifts I think humanity has ever enjoyed. The gift that we have witnessed tonight and received tonight. And so hear me carefully so you don't misread me. We live dangerously with music that moves so quickly, that caters to the ecstasy of the moment, but does not give time for reflection. I am mystified by a generation that can sing the same chorus 20 times but cannot sing 4 verses of a hymn. I don't understand it. Is it because we take leave of thought where we can repeat and repeat and repeat and not think of the wealth of thought that is unfolding? I say to you that music comes into your life and builds a reservoir so that in the moments where you're down and in the moments where you're dark inside, the song or a hymn or a chorus or whatever it was will come back to lighten your path and lessen your load. There's a Reader's Digest article that says when we're alone, we dance. I don't know if that's true, but I do know when we're alone, we sing. And that's about all I'm ever going to do. Not cursing anybody with my voice of music. But I'll tell you what, the great hymns, the great songs that you can sing in a car or sing alone at home or listen to by way of a record or a tape. Ladies and gentlemen, when the church gives us that gift, it gives us the sentiments that can lift us in darker moments. I saw this demonstrated, and I'll close with a couple of applications and I'll be through. My father-in-law suffered a heart attack. Very surprisingly, he was with us in Atlanta here at that time and had to go back to Toronto. But because of a medical plan there where it is a socialized medicine, even though he was in a very serious condition, he was going to have to wait 7 or 8 months before he could have his open heart bypass surgery. He was not sure he was going to make it. He was living with a lot of fear. And so we were in church this Sunday morning while he was at home, resting, battling this through, really emotionally struggling. And doctors will tell you when a person feels that he is that critical and that serious, chances are he may not make it the length of time that he's been asked to wait. And I was sitting in the balcony with Margie and our children, and downstairs was my mother-in-law sitting next to her friends. I watched her through the whole service. She had a very sad countenance the whole time. The preacher was done, the testimonies were done, everything was done. And then the closing hymn began, and then the tears could no longer be repressed. This was the hymn that was being sung, and the tears just flowed. It put it all together for her. Be still, my soul. The Lord is on thy side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. Leave to thy God to order or provide. In every change he faithful will remain. Be still, my soul, thy best, thy heavenly friend, through thorny ways leads to a joyful end. Be still, my soul, the hour is hastening on, when we shall be forever with the Lord, when disappointments, grief, and fear are gone, sorrow forgot, love's purest joys restored. Be still, my soul, when change and tears are past, all safe and blessed, we shall meet at last.
You've been listening to Ravi Zacharias in a message titled, Why Don't I Feel My Faith? If you'd like to purchase a complete copy of this program, call us at 1-800-448-6766. That's 1-800-448-6766. You can also order online at rzim.org.